Hi everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm so excited once again to be with my friend and colleague Julia Torres. I am JoEllen McCarthy and I am coming to you from New York, and I'm so excited to be here. I have the honor and privilege of being one of the book ambassadors alongside of Julia, and I get to serve children in pre-K through 8th grade.
And I am so happy to be here with you today, too, Joellen. I'm excited to be a part of this day. It's always a privilege to be able to join my colleagues and to present about the things that we love. I am Julia Torres, and I am currently a librarian in a public library system in Colorado. Joellen and I are working on some exciting things together, and we love coming together for our twice a year Educator collaborative presentations because we get the opportunity to synthesize a lot of the thinking that we've been doing all year long and put it together into a presentation for you all. So hopefully
Yes.
you will enjoy and get some good ideas. And let us know if you have questions or need any further additional support from us. We're always happy to lend a hand if we can.
Fabulous. Thank you, Julia. And I'm going to go ahead and put this screen at the end. We have our handles on the bottom, and at the end, we'll also leave you with our emails. So, as Julia said, we've sort of done this now biannually, and it's been a pleasure to be able to share our thinking about and beyond books. And we say that because if you've joined us before, you know how important it is for us to get our friends to shift their thinking from that book to books that. And so we want to just start by talking a little bit about our beliefs and reinforcing what we think is in the best interest of kids and how we can serve children. So, first and foremost, again, thinking about an invitation. This is an invitational approach. We share our thinking around books that we're loving in the moment, but we're always going to tell you our why so that we can provide you with that same understanding. And hopefully, you will then be able to believe or challenge your beliefs or think through in the same way with that invitation, so that we're not saying this is the only book to do this work for. And we certainly believe firmly that books can serve as our co-teachers. They become the best tool that we have to incorporate across all areas of the content, specifically with literacy, to think through ideas around reading, writing, and of course life lessons.
And we really believe in emphasizing community building and sharing of experiences over commodification of learning. In secondary education, which is my background and area of expertise, it looks a lot like an overemphasis on grades and on product over process. So we believe in emphasizing coming together as a community, sharing stories, but also sharing our experiences with stories and prioritizing that in the classroom over an emphasis on doing certain tasks in order to get I like to call it the carrot at the end of the stick. We also believe in celebrating our differences. You know, I am one of those people who comes from a very diverse background in my family, but also in my lived experiences. I've lived everywhere from New Mexico, Texas, Utah, California, Brazil, and I have family members that have lived in Costa Rica, Mexico, Spain, and Cameroon. And so understanding our differences and being open to knowing that we won't all have the same experience really helps young people cultivate that skill so that they are also able to celebrate differences and approach from a stance of curiosity rather than suspicion. And then we also believe in centering our students, of course, and centering care. So many times we think that we are centering students, but we have an adult structured and driven curriculum. We have an adult scheduled day. We made the schedule for how students will move throughout the school during the day. We have many times the adults are the ones that just have the final say about what books will or won't end up in the classroom. So I think that part of our guiding principle behind doing this work twice a year is that we want to remind people that it is not only best practice, but a good idea to bring in the highest quality books for our young people to taste and give them that concrete proof, that evidence that we do center them and that we're encouraging them to center themselves. Because after all, it is their school experience. Joellen, did
Well
you have
said.
anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that was so well said. Thank you, Julia. And I obviously we both feel very strongly that choice is a factor in this work. And so we hope that we provide you with some choices today to consider, to think about as you look at your current collection, as you reach out to your school librarians, or if you are a librarian, as you reach out to your community members, because this is what is so essential in community building. It's not just about individuals, but it's about the community of learners. And when we grow together with our choices and with our consideration for what's on our shelves and how we're using those books, I think that really does strengthen, story does strengthen our communities as well. So we have a few quotes that we also want to cite some individuals in this work. Right now, we know that it's really essential to keep hope alive. And in following the work of Dr. Zaretta Hammond, she recently just published about the message that we have to keep hope alive, and that's through the cumulative effect of small actions we take to positively impact students and the systems that support them. Just coming together on days like today or meeting with colleagues to be able to brainstorm, to be able to think about how we can better arm ourselves when we're dealing with censorship, when we're dealing with book banning, when we're dealing with the challenges that are happening across all of our classrooms, across all of the country. I know that our primary students, very much my area of concern, there's once again, a heated battle around the reading wars, and that could get very tiresome, not only for our students, but for the teachers. And so to keep hope alive as we think about the power of books and book joy, I think that's really essential.
And Goldie Muhammad, Dr. Goldie Muhammad is amazing, has come out with another amazing text called Unearthing Joy, a guide to culturally and historically responsive teaching and learning, wherein she talks about celebration and happiness and making room and time for that in schools. So often we are so focused on product and we're so focused on students using their time efficiently, but we forget, especially in the secondary grades, to make space and time for joy. And Dr. Muhammad says more than celebration and happiness, but also as wellness, beauty, healing, and justice for oneself and across humanity. I love that concept, justice for oneself. I was once, I had the honor of being on the screen with Goldie and doing a presentation. And she quoted, I believe, Dr. King when she said, the arc of the universe bends toward justice. And so I love that quote, and I've often referred to it, and it helps me remember when things really do feel unjust, as the current climate that we're in with all this book banning. It's important to remember that the arc of the universe does bend toward justice and that things will go that way again, especially if we do right by the young people who are in front of us.
Which is why we love days like today. And we have the opportunity to, whether you're watching us live or whether you're tuning in at a later point, that we have the opportunity to reflect and be responsive educators who can find a space to be mindful of that hope and that joy. And it isn't always easy. And so we encourage you to check out some of the other amazing sessions that are happening today during the EdCollab gathering, or of course, visit the website to see what's been archived. And on that note, Julia and I, we have mentioned this before, but we think it's so essential. If you haven't seen in our previous sessions, we've talked about the rights of the reader, and we've also talked about two resources that are really essential in these specific times around censorship and book banning. One QR code at the top will take you to a previous EdCollab closing where some of our colleagues were all participating in a very practical, strategic approach to provide resources to proactively and also in the moment respond to book challenges. And if you haven't seen those resources, we certainly hope that you will take advantage of that. Feel free to share and to reflect on that with your colleagues as well. And then, of course, there is a wonderful resource that was put out in an attempt to unite against book bans with an action toolkit that is also extremely helpful and necessary in these challenging times. We want you to take a moment also to perhaps pause a little bit. If you are watching with colleagues, if you're watching on your own, this might be a time where you'd like to stop at this point and think about or share with one another, share with us even using the hashtag, the EdCollab Gathering. We've talked a little bit about who or what has influenced our work, and we'd love to hear from you who or what has influenced your practice. Perhaps there's a professional resource or an educator that you think we should know about or you'd love to share, and please feel free to do that and to cite those individuals for us.
I know an educator that's influenced my practice, and her name's JoEllen McCarthy. Her book, Layers of Learning, is so beautiful in that it helps us remember the heart that is so often intended to be there in the classroom, but can get sucked out of the space by all of the benchmarks for achievement and all the language that we use to create the business of education. I love how I don't have another way to say it, but I just love the heart behind your work. And I was honored to be an early reviewer of the book. And I have my copy, it's just in the other room. And so I'm grateful for your contributions to the field.
That's so sweet. And I didn't know you were going to do that. And you're making me blush right now. I think everyone who knows when they watch this that I get a little bit nerdy about how much I love Julia and how she pushes me every day in the work that we do together. And I absolutely love learning from her, with her, and because of her. And she too has a fabulous resource, Liven Up Your Library, which I think should be in every library and in every school system. So, little a little mutual love there before we get into our book love and our book joy. So thank you, friend. But I'm sure everyone who's viewing knows how fabulous you are. And if they don't, I hope they follow and read everything that you've done, because of course, Julie is also the author of many blogs and many resources that will um, absolutely influence your practice. So I'm
Thank,
grateful for you, friend.
thank you.
All
Thank
right, so are you ready? We're ready
Yeah.
to do a little book buzz. Here we go. And as I mentioned, starting off with thinking about what's going on in our classrooms and thinking about our early readers, you might recognize two of these characters. They are from beloved books like Hair Love by Matthew A. Cherry, illustrated by Vashti Harrison, and of course, Juana Martinez Neal's Alma and How She Got Her Name. And they both have new series board books that are out. The Hair Love is an ABCs, which is completely affirming ABC book that has all of these beautiful individualized words that are meaningful to this character. And it serves as such a fabulous example as we're getting kids to think about words and letters and sounds, but really with rich interpretations. And there can be that struggle for teachers who are being forced to do certain things around phonics and phonemic awareness and really not thinking about the care that goes into this practice. And so starting with words that are important and meaningful and also illustrating letter sounds is an essential thing. We often talk about environmental print to do the same thing, where kids are thinking about what they know and what they love and still exploring sounds and knowledge about letters and words. And so in Alma's new board book series, there is a collection of words and it's a bilingual text that offers both examples as well. And so if you think about how we initially said, Julia and I, using books as our co-teachers, these become fabulous examples that we could look at and use even with the upper grades, right, Julia? Thinking about an ABC book, a book of words to connect into the content area. And I don't know if you want to add anything to that before we move on.
No, you can go ahead and move on. I think that what you said about folks not being afraid to use picture books with young people of all ages is connected to the work of our colleague Jillian Heisey, and she runs Classroom Book a Day, and I think that it's completely. She's somebody who I've learned from a lot too, because I've had students in my classes who were, I hate to say, I don't want to put a label on them, but they were at level 1 or level 2 of their English language proficiency. And I think it can be a real confidence booster to give someone a book that communicates in drawings or communicates in language that is not so complex that the person can't access it. So there's a lot to be said for giving someone something that is accessible, regardless of the lexile level.
Yeah, great point. And of course, thinking about that too, just to engage kids with the visual literacy is so huge. I was actually in a building today, and some of you may know that I like to keep books and books that I'm in love with on my tag getting into a building, so that if I see someone I don't happen to have a book on me, I can refer them to a book that's a favorite. And this is a book that I've been talking a lot that kind of speaks to this as well. And I think we mentioned it, but it may not have been out yet in the spring gathering. It's called My Dog Just Speaks Spanish. And on every page, it shows that this young narrator is trying to help her dog, who understands all of her commands in Spanish, but not yet English. And so, just the opportunity to think about labeling a room or labeling a classroom and using print in this way, it's another way for kids to build on and to explore and celebrate language. So, just wanted to add that thought as well. We have a book that just actually came out. I know we're being recorded, but it just came out yesterday. This book was just released, and it is the words are by Gary R. Gray Jr. and the pictures are by Oge Mora. And I think it's just another beautiful example and interpretation of the "Where I'm From" poem. Can I say that? I'm not saying that Gary did that exactly as is, but that has just grown in so many different interpretations as individuals think about getting kids to explore and to really, really celebrate the beauty of and the diverse places that we come from, both physical and emotional, and all aspects of that. And I don't know if you've seen it yet, Julia, but of course, with the illustrations by Oge Mora, it is wonderful. Everything she does is wonderful. And I'm excited to see as kids continue to interpret that poem, and the images that I had on there was another way for younger children to explore where they're from or who they're from or what makes them who they are. So I think it's important as we celebrate and explore not only ourselves, but where we come from as a community.
And talking about where we come from as a community, the approach that I took here with this slide was to connect three books at three different levels that are related. An American Story by Kwame Alexander. I'm not sure how many of you have read that yet, but it is absolutely beautiful and does such a brilliant job of helping people unlearn some of what they may have learned in school as children, which was probably 20, 30, maybe for some of us even 40 years ago, and reimagine their understanding of America's past and that specific part of the past, which is enslavement of African peoples, that a lot of educators don't feel comfortable or are not prepared to talk about. So, An American Story can be connected to Free Water by Amina Lukman Dawson. Free Water is a story of folks who were Black and in the Americas, but were actually not enslaved because they were maroons. And some of you may know already, but there are various pockets of African people that were brought to the Americas and were not enslaved either because they ran away successfully or because they were born into communities of folks that managed to evade capture and enslavement. So, Free Water is a winner, as you can see by the awards on the front, and also a beautiful book to pair with An American Story. And then further on in the continuum, we've got Let Us Descend by Jessamine Ward. This one is new, so I think it's coming out next month. But I can tell you, you are in for a treat. If you love Jessamine Ward, I begged for the arc of this book at ALA this year, and it finally came just a few weeks ago, and you will not be disappointed. So that's just a way that you might look at the American story, including the enslavement of Africans, and find a way, an entry point into that part of our history via a middle grade, YA, or picture book narrative.
I always love doing this with you because we naturally tend to create sort of these reading ladders. And I'm reminded of the work of Terry Lassane and how important it is for teachers to provide those ladders for children of all ages so that they have what they're comfortable and what they're accessible, what they feel comfortable accessing, and what they are interested in, but also knowing that there are the different challenge levels, and being able to pair text in that way is such a helpful tool for teachers. And again, to make everything accessible by having that background knowledge and the connections and all of that. And so there's so many ways to go around doing that, but Julia happens to do such a fabulous job as a librarian in helping to create those stacks, if you would. And so as you're thinking about this work, as you're thinking about creating collections or grabbing go stacks or putting baskets together, be mindful of that reading ladder and that approach. Perhaps you might even want to include a conversation, if you're a high school or secondary or middle school teacher, with a team of educators, so that your ELA provider, your content area providers can get together and to brainstorm a little bit about what it is that you're working towards or working on with your kids and create stacks in this way. All right, going back on to Stories That Capture Hearts. This is a new book, and I apologize because I'm not 100% sure if this is out at this exact moment. It may not be yet, it may be very soon. It's called Zora the Story Keeper by Ebony Joy Wilkins, and the illustrator is Dare Coulter. And it came to mind because, of course, if you notice in The American Story, Dare Coulter is the illustrator of that text as well. And she is so talented. The images are just so vibrant and jump off the pages, and it really does speak to the power of storytelling. And this, it very much reminds me of Aunt Flossie's Hats and Crab Cakes Later, which is kind of an older classic book, where there are objects and things that remind memories and moments in someone's life. And this story keeper, Aunt Zora, is actually trying to kind of share her experiences and her stories so that her niece will take up on this same task and become the next storyteller. It's a beautiful, very moving, heartwarming story, but again, will spark memories and moments and invite kids to do the same as writers. Going back to your screen. Whoops, sorry.
That's all good. I'm going to just go through these two quickly. I don't want to not do justice, but we have so many more to go through. So, what I can tell you about these two is that, yes, they might both be classified LGBTQ, but they also are written by authors representing the Latine diaspora. So, those are going to be Hispanic or Spanish speaking peoples. And something that I really like about Ander and Santi is that that story takes place in Texas, where we've got a lot of issues right now with marginalizing the stories of people who live there and who are going about their daily lives. So I think that book is a really great entry point. It's first of all very romantic, but also emotional and captivating. It deals with family, love, loss, the question of identity and being documented or undocumented. And the inexplicable logic of my life also deals with belonging and coming into yourself. So I think that if we were to approach either one of those books or both of them, not as LGBTQ plus stories per se, but about stories of belonging and finding people who accept and love us and the journey onto that, and then understanding that queer identity is not a new thing, and it is a part of the human experience. And these stories are stories that center queer experiences. I think that's one way that educators can help our young people in classrooms who either are in families where perhaps they have two moms or two dads, or if they have queer identities themselves, they can also feel that, experience that journey of coming into themselves through reading either one of these texts.
I have to read both of those. I'm excited to read them.
I think you'll like them. And this slide is another intersectional experience. I'm going to quickly go through this too because we have so many more. But Saving American Beach is not new, but is a very cool story about a beach where Black people could actually swim. And there are many stories in the United States of beaches that were segregated, but because they're now integrated, we don't necessarily share the stories of segregated beaches with our children. It's important for them to know that if you can go to the beach and swim anywhere, it wasn't always that way. Swim Team also talks about learning to swim and why so many Black people in communities, Black Americans specifically, and Black Canadians don't know how to swim. It's a little bit different if you are from the Caribbean, if you happen to be Black and Honduran or Central American, you might have a better chance at knowing how to swim because beaches are everywhere. But it's not uncommon here in the United States for people to only have access to a pool and for that pool to have been segregated and for people not to have learned how to swim. Barely Floating is another very cool intersectional story. This time we have an Afro Latina, and her dream is to be a synchronized swimmer. So the thing that all three of these stories have in common is the experience of Blackness. But what I like about them is that they explore diasporic Blackness. So we don't think about the identity of being Black as just one thing. And especially in the United States, because there are so many different kinds of Black people residing in the United States. So I love the intersection of sports with swimming, our pastimes that we love, our identities that might intersect or might be more than just one or monolithic. And I love the opportunity to teach a little bit of history as well with those texts.
I love that. And I know, Julia, when you added that, I was reminded of a new book that came out this summer that's called When You Can Swim, which really is a picture book that's embracing nature and celebrating the joy of swimming, and with a really very eclectic group of various scenes of people swimming, different areas, different people, different ways of being. And I love the fact that it's a celebration of belonging too, in that finding joy in swimming and in water. So I just wanted to share that one, connecting to that great slide that you have. Thank you so much. All right. So I think about, as I said, finding some examples of books that celebrate what we love, that will encourage kids to then find opportunities to tell their own stories, share their own stories about who they are, about who they love, who loves them. And this book, Raisa Figueroa, is the author and illustrator of What My Daddy Loves. And it's kind of like an ode to dads, a love letter to dads. And again, a variety of examples of dads, but very simple, poetic text almost, that's repetitive in a way that every page has what my daddy loves. My daddy loves XYZ. My daddy loves ABC. And a really simple pattern that young children can follow in their own writing. And I wanted to add two other books that were illustrated, not also written, but illustrated by the same creator. And the first is called We Are One, and the other is called You Will Do Great Things. And these are really just three very beautiful picture books that she illustrated that have the opportunity to invite conversations that will get kids to talk about how they are on their own empowered, what their hopes and dreams are, and their loves and desires. So, thinking about that, as we said, trying to find these examples that will encourage and support not only centering kids, but centering care and community. And so, this is a new one that's out by Janelle Harper, and it's illustrated, if you don't recognize the amazing illustrations by Frank Morrison. For the real kid lit lovers out there, instantly you see a Frank Morrison book and you know that it's his. And I just absolutely love this book because of the way it celebrates a community and this individual's community and what it looks like. And again, just getting kids to think about finding joy in those places, because we want kids to think about that in terms of seeing variety of spaces and places and learning about our world and those who live in it. And so I just love that because it makes me think of where I grew up in Queens and seeing the apartment building in the background and just knowing that sense of community and that joy and the things that you can do. I love. I know that we wanted to take a moment, Julia and I, in talking about, we have a lot of Hispanic authors and illustrators present in our presentation this time, but we also want to take a moment to talk a little bit about this as well.
It is my dream to have a piece of art from Frank Morrison in my house one day. If anybody's listening that can make that happen, I would love it. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I love that you put that book into the presentation. Just a word about heritage celebrations. Let's remember that they're intended to disrupt dominance from one cultural group. It's an opportunity to learn and share knowledge about groups and identities from the margin, including intersectional identities. We want to minimize harm. That is a goal. We want to understand and help our communities learn that the purpose of Hispanic Heritage Month is to educate people about Hispanic heritage in order to minimize harm through education, the harm that comes along with ignorance. We also need to learn to be comfortable, though, with the phrase, I don't know, but I can find out, or I can find somebody who does know, rather than fumbling trying to make something up. I've been guilty of this myself. It is very important to just get comfortable with the phrase, I don't know. And then also approaching new people and experiences with curiosity rather than suspicion. I have experienced this a lot myself. I have a very mixed background. It would be so much easier if I was just, my identity was just really straightforward. But I do have heritage from all kinds of different groups, and that's sometimes really confusing for people. And I love it when people approach with curiosity and openness, such as if you would like to share anything with me or educate me in any way, I'm open to it, rather than I'm going to demand that you tell me certain things about your culture and your background.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point too, Julia, too, and the assumptions that are made, right, by individuals. And so that we need to use stories to help kids to think about exploring and really focusing on the array of questions that come from getting to know who someone is and where they're from, and not just making assumptions about one aspect of someone's identity. I think it's interesting too that there's a danger, which is why we wanted to talk about that, with the way in which some schools celebrate heritage months, because they'll put all this effort and, you know we'll say experience around certain aspects of a month's history, and then it's like, okay, and then they never are to return to think about the beauty of, seamlessly interweaving aspects of a variety of individuals and cultures that it should be celebrated all year long and woven into the curriculum, right? Rather than this is a month, okay, check it off the box. And so getting teachers to really think about, and pushing some of your colleagues too to think beyond heroes and holidays. So yes, celebrate, be aware, honor those heritage months, but also honor the lived experiences all year long and the histories all year long.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to our books and our exciting titles and ideas. And I'm going to turn it back to you, my friend.
This is going to be so quick. Please, please, please read Secret of the Moon Conch if you are working with folks in middle or high school. It's by David Bowles and Guadalupe Garcia McCall. And one of the things that I was honored to do, I was able to read an early manuscript of this as it was being written. And I can tell you, it is such a beautiful intergenerational story centered around this conch. And it talks about colonization and how the effects of colonization continue to impact people today. So it's got one young man in the 1500s, I believe, and then a young woman in, I want to say, it's been a minute since I read it, y'all. I want to say, I don't want to butcher it, so I'm not going to say. But she's in more modern times. So it goes back in history, and then a guy in modern times, and a conch that brings them together. In the same fashion, Healer of the Water Monster has a young boy and his grandfather, and they bond over storytelling, over legends, over shared culture and history. And one of the cool things about this book is that each chapter begins with a Navajo word. So you can learn a little bit of the language as you progress through the book. That one's a middle grade book. And then All Out is really cool because it talks about queerness throughout the ages. Again, queer identity is not a new thing. That's something that people like to say. I've heard it said more than once, and it's not new. So it's important to help folks understand that reality as well.
Yeah, I love that you keep saying that, right? I mean, it's just, and it's scary that we have to say that because of what's going on in many classrooms and in schools across the country. Um, which brings us to thinking about how important it is as we have kids, and they're thinking about ways in which they can make a difference in our world. And I absolutely love Nicholas Smith as an illustrator, and now he has a book as a sole creator, as a writer and illustrator. And if you have not yet seen this book, The Artivist, you need to run to your library or ask your librarian about it. And it's just such a beautiful book. And there's a video that you can actually Google. I meant to put the QR code and I forgot. And since this is recorded, you won't see that now, but maybe when we upload our slides, I can put that in where he talks about his creative process and he talks about how this book really sums up who he is and how he combines and wants children to see the importance of combining art and activism. And I love the note, the author's note in that book is so essential, where he talks about how we have to use one's talents to visualize a path that allows for healing, equity, and inclusion. And I think when schools celebrate days like Dot Day and get kids to be creative and to make their mark, we also want them to think about how they can make a mark to make a difference. And on that note, I have to share this book, The Brand New Never Used Perfect Crayons, because that was a book that I wasn't planning on including. And then I had a conversation with an art teacher during Dot Day week, because there was a student who was very uncomfortable about using the brand new box of crayons, which, think about kids who have anxiety, think kids who have certain self, awareness about what's comfortable and not comfortable. And so that's a book that really looks at a bigger picture about getting kids to be comfortable with who they are and what's right for them. And so, yes, make your mark, but know that kids sometimes making their mark is just being aware of who they are and being themselves. Okay. We are coming to almost the end. Derek Barnes has a new book, Like Lava in My Veins. Derek Barnes, if you don't know, is the author of I Am Every Good Thing and the two picture books, The King of Kindergarten and The Queen of Kindergarten. And this is a really beautiful collaboration where he's paired with some DC and Marvel Comics creators. And so it's kind of a picture book with a graphic novel slash comic book twist, lots of speech bubbles, inner conversations. And it's about a young boy who goes to an academy of super abilities and the way in which he is welcomed and not welcomed by certain teachers. And it's really just a message about empowering kids and finding those nurturing caregivers who can really lift us up and lift ourselves and our students up, and kids being aware that every single one of our students has superpowers within and being able to access those superpowers. I paired it with patchwork prints because I just thought the illustrations, even on the cover, were so similar in this celebration and this joy. And this is a book in patchwork prints by Baptiste Paul and illustrated by Kit Thomas. You don't often see stories that were actually inspired by a memory in St. Lucia and growing up in St. Lucia, but it's all about how this child is creating clothing with the queen, his mom, and he being the prince. That really is something special and unique that they've created together.
And these books, I think you will be surprised, but also fascinated by. We Light Up the Sky is actually about a time when there's an alien invasion and it's got kids of color. I almost think of it as like it has some components of that show Roswell for folks who have not seen or heard of it. That was one of my favorite shows. I still don't think that we make enough time or space in secondary education in particular for sci-fi and the imagination. So I think that that's really important to make space for. Sky Hunter as well from Marie Lu, and then out there is a an anthology that has stories of queerness set in imaginary worlds. So I put Sky Hunter in here because one of my students that loves sci-fi told me that he really liked it. It's a duology, I believe. So I just wanted to remind people that as much as we like to support really young kids in indulging in their imaginations as a place where they can play and imagine that anything is possible, we need to remember that that's important for our older young people as well.
Great point.
And then these are more anthologies. We don't have time at this moment for me to go through each and every one of them, but take a screenshot if you want, because these are all fabulous. If I had to shout out two of these that are really special, Our Shadows Have Claws, I think is really special because it's got monster stories from all over Latin America. So if you are looking for something for Hispanic Heritage Month, I think Our Shadows Have Claws would be like a monster story that you could read every week, something like that. And then Boundless is beautiful because it connects back to what we were talking about earlier, which is celebrating difference, multicultural and multiracial identities. So not just one person with one monolithic identity, or not that those of us that have monolithic identities are not special, but what I mean is that you can't just look at someone and always know exactly what's going on in their racial, cultural, or ethnic presence. So that book, Boundless, does a beautiful job of helping to tell the stories of people who have those experiences.
Love it. And dropping back down again now to some primary and elementary titles that really explore and honor individuality, gender expression, and self love. I absolutely love the book Flower Girl, and I paired it on here with an older title, Annie's Plaid Shirt, because I feel like a lot of people may remember that text when it was out. And it's so important to think about how we are exploring and really validating what kids feel. And so, just the example in this book, Flower Girl, and is very common in some of the other titles right on that page. The young child has excuse me, who is going to be married and is excited to invite this niece to be a flower girl. And she's super excited about it. What she's not excited about is wearing like a stiff, um, frilly dress kind of a thing. So it's just about not being comfortable in those clothes and being comfortable in one's own skin. And that's kind of what Annie's Plaid Shirt has done, as well as Molly's Tuxedo and the other text on the screen, which is called The Good Hair Day, where that is a child who really longs for long hair. And then in My Rainbow, it is a book about a transgender child. That's a beautiful story. That's a true story told by that individual's mom, and the way in which there was acceptance and love and understanding and growth for the family in that experience. So we wanted to include some of those as we talk about thinking and supporting and loving all aspects of children's identities. I also wanted to just do briefly, again, we cannot do enough to talk about nonfiction. And so I just threw a few new titles on there that were kind of fun. I'm trying to love germs because let's face this world in post pandemic slash COVID starting up again. It's a very funny book by Bethany Barton with a ton of voice, lots of examples for craft lessons in there and talking to the reader and writing. And then I have to put in the football's best traditions and weirdest superstitions, because even if you are not a New York football fan, if you don't know what's going on in the world with the Jets and what's and Aaron Rodgers and all the anticipation for having him come start, and he lasted about 10 minutes out with an injury, there are kids who that will just grab them instantly and has been grabbing them. And then there's a new text which was written by two of our Olympic stars about amazing Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders who inspire us all. I threw those in there along with 125 pet rescues because they're just simple, like one pagers that really serve as great examples for reading nonfiction and for also writing. And then Behold the Octopus, which is a narrative nonfiction that has a lot of play with words. And we just wanted you to be mindful of what Melissa Stewart talks about with 5 kinds of nonfiction, which could be another whole session in and of itself, but there's a QR code. So as you're exploring the joys of informational text, you're aware of and balancing some of those opportunities for your students.
And very quickly, I'll just talk about two of my favorite resources for secondary students, Edpuzzle and Actively Learn. If you have not explored them yet, I think that it's entirely possible to have students creating their own Edpuzzles based off of informational text that they find interesting. Same thing with Actively Learn. They can add their own articles and other pieces into the platform and then create activities, comprehension questions, all kinds of things to go along with those. those. So I highly recommend having students co-create the experiences, the learning experiences, have real world applications, and then partner with your local library, public library, to check out the primary resources that they have, because you might be surprised how much young people will love the primary source documents that exist in our libraries and archives.
Yeah. So, just as a reminder, we hope that we have you thinking about and beyond books and not just thinking about book lists, but thinking about books that will help serve kids. And we want to hear from you. So, if you have titles that you enjoyed today, or you have titles that you want us to know about, or some of your friends who might be joining us on the gathering, you can certainly tweet out, or if you would like, email the EdCollab gathering, you can contact us. There's even a book ask a book ambassador button on the website that you can reach out to, ask us questions or share your thoughts and comments and continue to learn with us. And we will continue to learn from you. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. We're so happy we were able to be with you today, and please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your time in the gathering, and we'll see you next time.
Yep, take good care.